I just wanted to start off by saying you and I have known each other for a very long time, and you have an amazing story to tell. And so one of the things I wanted to share with people is when you live a debt-free lifestyle and when you really get focused in on what your purpose and mission is, you end up creating in very short periods of times, huge volumes of content like Roland here. And what you're doing now is quintessential to everything that you are, which is your latest project.
Well, it's not my project. I've served it when I look back at my superpower, or what did I do in the past, and all the way from college, the last 40 years, I was basically a professional problem solver, and it worked into being like executive producer, and I realized that that's the duties I've done with a lot of as executive producer, and a lot of that, they get their name on the project, but it's like buildings or anything else you build. Today, I see myself as a laborer. And when somebody says just a laborer, I say, wait, laborers are very important. Having the mindset of a laborer is so important in everything nowadays of legacy, in my mind. Because like I could sit there and I say, I have my building over in the other city I built. I have, 4 houses here. And like I say, I built this house. This is, and then we got another house that we had over there, and I could sit there and somebody said, "Oh yeah, you built that," and I said, "Well, actually, I didn't pick up a hammer or a nail or anything on that whole thing, and it was all done by all these specialty labor people. And what I do is learning how to connect the right people, and they did it, and they put it all together." But they don't get credit for building. They know in their heart. So they were the laborers. And so my project now, which you and I have had deep conversations about, it started like 5 years ago. And my project actually is a divine project. It is the big picture. One of the things I was thinking about writing about is, you're familiar with Abraham Maslow. Most people are in our business. And, and my focus now is the grandparents and all the and anti-retirement, because they are boomers are heading to becoming the worst generation. That was one of the things I read that really sparked my passion. And wait, I don't want to leave that as a legacy, and you start looking at what is a legacy, and then you realize when I think of legacies, I think of, well, I know somebody who's be remembered forever, and people are always going to feel their impact. And I think of 4 right away. Think of Martin Luther King. Would you say?
Yes.
Mother Teresa.
Of course. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Pretty big.
Yeah. And Mahatma Gandhi, another one I use.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they were all alive walking on this planet, they never did anything for themselves. They never went out to leave that legacy by trying to leave that legacy. They just did what they were called to do, and they just did the labor, for the big picture. Mm-hmm. But so when people are authors and speakers, this is the thing that when I did my first 2 books, I did one because, several years ago, because I wanted to be an expert in the financial field. And, I was one of the top financial advisors to baby boomers, is kind of like my tagline. And then I realized I was helping people plan for retirement. And it's like, oh my gosh, now I feel I need to be repentant of that, because we were never intended to retire as human beings.
Right. Exactly.
But I wanted to get on the stage. I saw myself, I was my most high feeling on life. If I had only 3 hours left to live, and I knew I was going to be gone in 3 hours, I asked people, what would you do? I mean, if I asked you that, what would you want to be doing your last 3 hours of your life? But if I can put you where you want to be in those last 3 hours with whoever you want, and put you there for those last 3 hours, what would it be?
I would want to be surrounded by my family and friends and having one heck of a party out here in the mountains of Colorado.
Now, that is the most common answer. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of people. Yeah.
If you ask me, I wouldn't say that as the answer for me, because when I asked myself that several years ago, I thought, wait a minute, you know what? So that will be a regret that I have it. So I am surrounded by family and I do it all the time and I'm connected with them all the time and partying all the time with my family. That's what it's all about. So that's not one of them because I'm already doing it. Mine would be on a stage in front of as many young people as I possibly can and giving the message I gave for many years at colleges, overcoming fear, go after your dream. You were here called for a reason and you need to go after that and not listen to the advice of other people who have no idea what your path is, and it's changed a lot of lives in doing that. But man, if I could just do that for my last 3 hours. And then now it's probably in front of all the older people. If you have 3 generations, you got the 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90. I don't like labeling, and I'm trying to figure out how can we, I moved from this generation to this generation to this generation, right? Instead of now I'm labeled as a boomer, you're what, a millennial?
Oh, you're so sweet. No, I'm what they call a Gen Xer because I'm that crazy generation that actually knew technology.
So,
yeah.
But I feel that labeling of any kind is the wrong way because that brings out so much judgment, so much opinions, so much perception. And when you crowd your mind with opinions and judgments and perceptions, you leave very little room for the truth. And opinions and judgments take you further away from the truth. So knowing who a person is not by the label. So, oh, you're a boomer. So I've already got this opinion about what you're a Gen Xer. I already got this opinion about who you are, but it's not who you are.
Right.
Does that make sense? So,
oh, yes.
So I'm trying to what if we rename these generations, and call this the sunrise, the rising generation, which they do, they use that. And then the middle one is the whatever, and then we're the sunset generation.
I think the middle one is considered the mentoring generation.
Right.
Because they're mentoring the younger one. Yeah. I've heard kind of terminology used just because it is a phase of life. I mean, it's very biological and it's very common across cultures. Even you have the young ones that, they're hardwired at a frequency that's much, much more in tune than the sunset generation. However, the sunset generation's also helping mentor them. But then the middle one is the mentoring generation or the parenting generation. It depends on what person you talk to.
That's why I was saying the thing about Maslow, come around to that was, I was reading about Leisureville, there's older people, they plan for retirement, they go and live down in Arizona and Florida and just sit by the pool and sip on lemonade until they die. And they've got all of these lessons and everything in that they've learned from all their challenges, their tragedies and everything they went through. They've gathered all these lessons from them, unique to each individual.
Exactly.
So what I liken that into is, in the Bible, for instance, people in the Bible, so many different, discernations of the Bible, and the parable of the talents. They use that as money. But to me, I'm thinking, well, what if the talents are really references to the lessons that Janine had gathered through all her experiences? So now you've got these talents, and now you are given so many. And I think in 15 it says, according to your several ability. So you're never challenged more than what you're giving, even though you feel like your situation is hopeless. And you're going through and you're going through all this challenge, you don't think you can handle it, you're never given more than what you can handle. And what you do is you get that mindset, okay, what am I going to learn out of this that I can take and use down the road to help other people? And that's changing the talents. But I see the sunset generation as and they gathered all these talents and they're burying them in the ground. I see the rising generation who are struggling and, the high suicide rate, all of this, where loneliness intersects with hopelessness. And I've had two suicides, two great friends. I lost my dad to suicide, but then I've had teenagers, my own teenage grandchildren who, and it's like almost every one of them, no one suspected that they were in that dark. You see, so I'm trying to figure out, how do we get them out of that dark? Is you bring light.
Mm-hmm.
That story I shared one time about my grandson who was with me, he was in dark, and we inherited him, and I was bringing more dark, and I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. And then when I realized that, wow, God never gave us the power to change others. He only gave us the power to change ourselves so that we can become a light to guide others. And so I started looking at, it's like, oh, so I have to change, and I did. So I realized that the Maslow, I was bringing up the thing, you've got the basic physiological needs, mm-hmm. shelter, etc., love, and self-esteem, and that. And the next one is self-actualization at the top. That's what to me would be what a person was here to. This is their purpose. This mm-hmm. is why I'm here. It's still about you at that point, but the parents don't ever get to that with the kids. They only are taking care of this part. I see the grandparents as being the place that we need to get them in that mindset that they can come over and realize, jump over them and just learn who these kids are, and just be there, bringing light constantly. No criticism, no judgments, no opinion, just loving them unconditionally, that when they go in the dark, they have no hesitation to come here because they'll listen. And then they should be the one bringing up the self-actualization and supporting them, and not giving them fish or teaching them fish, but fishing with them in their pond. Mm-hmm. And
meeting them where they are. And right. What Roland is talking about is the 12 steps to self-actualization that was started by Maslow. People remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but what's interesting is they forgot that he had also the 12 steps of self-actualization, how to become the best human being you could be with your personal circumstances. It's a very individualized kind of curriculum. So thank you for reminding us of that.
Well, and the one that I think that the top, very top, right, crisscrosses, after you get to the top and crisscrosses, is where I feel like that I have attained, mm-hmm. and that's transcendence. Mm-hmm. Getting to the point that it's never about me anymore. Actualization is still about you and your purpose and everything, but beyond that, it's not about you anymore. You pretty well is making it. That's where legacies are built. That's where Mother Teresa and King and all them. That's where they function in transcendence, and where you become the laborer, where it's not your project anymore that you're working on. And I grabbed the URL. I have my IT person, she's Philippines, Japan, and I said, oh, I need this URL. It's called helpingothers.com, because you are helping others, mm-hmm. who are helping others. Mm-hmm. That's where I think like a grandparent is helping them. You can't helping them in a way of not just who they are. And the parents take care of that, the basic needs, but helping them figure out their purpose. And there really isn't any purposes that are in existence that doesn't serve other people. You know what I mean? They all serve other people, mm-hmm. right? And so anyway, those are like, it hit my passion, my butt. You caught me where my mind is today, as I figure now I'm ready after 5 years to start working on my book. But then I realized but before it didn't work because I wanted the book. It still was about me by doing the book. And I really don't care if I'm the author of the book. If I bring in other people and be an executive producer and bring in the people, this book needs to be out there.
I agree. And so I wanted to introduce you to Roland Thompson because he is the connection grandpa. And I want to thank you very much for listening to what he has to say today, because one of the beautiful things about Roland is he and I sat down and had a very deep conversation that was not only philosophical, but very spiritual based on our own personal experiences. And for those of you who've read my books, the Divine series, you understand how intimate those experiences are with the divine. Roland himself has also had those experiences, and it's amazing how the universe brings those together. So we'll leave you with that little teaser, and we'll talk to you again very soon.